So first of all, I just want to introduce myself. So my name is Tachini, and I often only say my first name because if I say my last name, it confuses people. My last name is Pete. People think I'm saying my name backwards for some reason. So whenever I go to any place that has records on me, and I'll say, who are you? Tachini Pete. And then they go and look for the records, and they always can't find it. And I said, well, look under Tachini. Sure enough, that's where it is. Oh, sorry, sir, we'll correct that for you. Next time I go back, it's the same thing. So anyways, I'm the program director at Potlatch Fund in Seattle. We are a foundation, a granting agency, a capacity building. We do capacity building trainings, technical assistance. We work with grantees. Myself, I enjoy working with language programs, whether that's a tribal department or a nonprofit organization. My specialty is language revitalization, second language acquisition, and business development. I have an MBA. I am formerly the director of the Usum Salish Language Institute out of Arlee, Montana on the Flathead Reservation. I'm one of the co-founders. I led that effort for 10 years. I've been teaching the Salish language since 1996. And one of my projects that I worked on was the Salish Language Dictionary, which was published in 2010. Huge amount of work. It took me about 12 years to write that. And I'm also a small business owner. I make drums, and that's who I am. My parents, my dad is Navajo and my mother is Salish. And I had the fortunate opportunity to grow up on both reservations. I was exposed to both languages, Navajo and Salish, as a child growing up. And it's probably one of the reasons why I'm involved in language today when I look back on that. Not only was I immersed in both of those languages, I was also had the opportunity to have some other exposure. My uncle, who is a speaker of Blackfeet, was very instrumental in my life, and I had the opportunity to hear that language very often when I got to stay with him. My grandfather was a Spanish speaker. He was also a Spanish teacher, and he also wrote the first Blackfeet dictionary. So I have a lot of language background in my life through my family. So that's just a little bit about me and how I got to be standing right here today. So today I'm going to talk about language revitalization, the journey to revitalization, and the language transfer system. So when I think about language revitalization, I ask myself, what does that mean? What does that look like? What is a revitalized language? What does that look like? And how do we know we've reached that point when our language is revitalized? So for me, revitalization is when the language is passed naturally from parent to child. And when it's totally revitalized in a healthy situation, a healthy community, it's not only passed from parent to child, but it's also passed from family or community to child. And I think one of the speakers was saying the other day that, in 3 generations, the language can drop off. Well, I look at it the other way as well. In 3 generations, if there are 3 generations of speakers, then I believe that the language has been revitalized. And I call this natural immersion. Natural immersion is when you're growing up as a child, or even before you're born, you're listening, you're hearing your parents speak, you're hearing your siblings speak, you're hearing your grandparents, your family, your community all around you is speaking in the language. We all learn the language that we speak from our parents, from our community, from our siblings. And that's what I call natural immersion. So there's only one proven strategy that actually produces fluent speakers, or speakers in general, and that's immersion. And I have classified immersion into 3 different areas. There's natural immersion, which I just talked about, where you learn from your parents and your community. There's intentional or forced immersion, and this is if you were to go to another country for the purpose of learning the language or whatever, and you put yourself into that community. You have an intention to do that. And there's also forced immersion, which for many of our people were put into boarding schools and forced to speak another language or forced to learn another language. And then there's structured immersion, and that's what I'm going to be talking about in my presentation here. Structured immersion is where you are intentionally designing lessons or methods around a structure, around a sequence, based upon the workings of your language and how it operates and how all of its features are incorporated within that structure. So I'll leave it at that for now. So I like to use a metaphor to talk about what I'm going to be talking about. So the goal of our efforts, I believe, is that we're trying to produce speakers. And we want our speakers to join the speaking community. And I believe that's a goal of all of us here. And what seems to be so difficult about that is that we can see it, we know where it's at, we look at our fluent speakers, our first language speakers, and us as learners, us as teachers, we want to be in that place. We want to join that speaking community. We want to be like our elders that can speak the language, that had the opportunity or the fortune to grow up in that language. We want our students to be there. We want ourselves to be there. And how come we can't be that? We can see it. It's like a mountain sticking up out on the plains is a big, huge mountain. We know exactly where it's at. We see those speakers, and we want to join them. We want to be in that place. So how do we get to that point? How do we traverse that terrain? How do we get there? Like in a journey, we prepare for that journey. We gather sufficient resources. We try to navigate to that place the best that we can. It says right here. So we have to gather the resources to go to that place. We need to create or acquire the tools to make that journey. And while we're on the way, we need to evaluate where we're at. We could still see that mountain sticking up over there. You know, how far am I to that place? Do I need to, go back this way and go around these rocks here, cross this waterway? You know, what is it that we're doing? Do I need to go back and find a different route? And then once I'm there, once I've reached that point as a learner, as a second language learner, and I've reached that point, how do I bring other people along with me? How do I, create that path? I got to draw a map for them or create a guide so that they know where to go. And I want to make that path as short as possible for them so that they don't have to spend 20 years on this journey. That's how long I've been learning the language, 20 years. And for most people, most sane people, don't have 20 years to spend learning the language. If we can shorten that down to a year to 2 years, a lot more people can make that journey. So the challenge in that metaphor is we need to identify the path, we need to draw a map, produce guides, and create the tools to facilitate that journey efficiently and effectively. So that's the journey metaphor that I use to explain what we're trying to do as revitalizing our languages. We know where that place is at. We know who our speakers are, and we want us as learners. We want to be and join that speaking community. We want our students to join that speaking community. And the challenge is, how do we get there? Why can't we get there? Why has in my tribe, they've been trying for 50 years actively teaching the language classes, immersion camps, immersion schools, classes in the college, classes in the public schools, classes in the community, language camps. All these efforts have been going on for 50 years in my community. Why am I the only one in the 50 years that they've been trying? Why am I the only one that has reached that point to become a speaker? How many millions of dollars has been spent on these efforts? And I say this because in 2002, me and 3 other people started an immersion school for children. And looking back at that today, and all the things that I've learned since then, and the thing that I'm going to present here today, if I could go back in time to that time period when we were preparing and getting all of our resources together and writing the grants and convincing our community and finally getting the funds to open a school, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't open that school. I would invest a lot more time in making sure we had a solid foundation. And that's what I want to talk about, is that foundation. How can we, as learners with limited knowledge of the language, how can we impart fluency on children? How do we do that? So what I've developed here is what I call it a language transfer system. And a language program that produces speakers is one that is effective because it's producing speakers. Speakers that are conversationally fluent, and they produce it in a realistic given time frame. And I always say 12 to 24 months is a realistic time frame that we should be aiming for. It's a standard throughout other languages that speakers can be produced in 12 to 24 months. My brother, who's in the military, he went through an Arabic immersion program through the military. He learned Arabic in 18 months. And he's a fluent speaker of Arabic. He can go on his missions in Afghanistan, Iraq, and speak Arabic. So an effective program is one that produces fluent speakers, conversationally fluent speakers, in a realistic given time frame. And an efficient program, language transfer program, is one that continually shortens the learning time for an increasing number of individuals to become conversationally fluent. And that's the key to helping or to thinking about your own programs. Am I producing speakers? I'd say for even myself and my own program, 99% of the time the answer is probably going to be no. And if you're not effective, you can't be efficient either, because if you're not producing speakers, you can't increase the efficiency of it. So I use that journey metaphor because I myself have taken that journey. I've reached that point. I've become a conversationally fluent speaker of Salish. And I've also begun to chart out the map so that others can follow me. I can help them. I can facilitate their own learning. I can help language programs on my reservation become effective and efficient. So the thing that hinders most of us is limited resources. And I'm not just talking about money, but I'm talking about support of our communities, support of our tribal governments, support of the outside world, and seeing the importance of language revitalization and the importance of language as identity for our children so that they grow up to be strong, productive people for our communities. So resources are almost always limited, and a big problem for our efforts is that we have limited understanding of the languages that we're working with. If you're trying to teach something, you have to know something about what you're teaching. And probably the most critical thing that we lack is teaching capacity. And I'll talk more about that as well. And then we have limited understanding of second language acquisition. Second language acquisition is something that's been studied and studied and studied. There's all kinds of research on second language acquisition and how adults learn language and how children learn language. And that knowledge is out there for anybody to access and use. And it's something that needs to be incorporated into any language program, from the teaching aspect, from the designing of curriculum. So the struggle, this is, so after I was executive director of the Salish Language Institute, I took a year and a half off of work and I traveled around the country and I went to as many language programs as I could. And in that travel of a year and a half, I was talking to one immersion school director, and she was telling me, you know, it's kind of like we're expected to build a plane with duct tape while we're in the air, simultaneously learning how to fly. And she said that's the struggle that we're in, and that I just love that what she said, because that totally encapsulates the whole thing, the struggle that we are presented with. Duct tape. So around the world, there's all kinds of language programs out there. There's people are learning English, people are learning French, people are learning Spanish, people are learning all these languages. And the learning of a second language, there's the whole field of second language acquisition. In those programs, the ones that are effective, the ones that are producing speakers of their language, of all those, the teachers know the language, first of all. They're either a first language speaker or they're an advanced second language speaker. In almost every program, the teachers have their credentials as far as having a 4-year degree in some kind of education field. They often have graduate degrees in bilingual education. There's always an abundant source of curricula, and all the materials that they need are at hand. There's volumes and volumes of material that they can access. And one of the important things that I've noticed and that I've learned is that they all have very refined, sequenced courses. And the programs produce speakers in about 12 to 24 months. And this is known. This happens all the time. People are learning other languages effectively and efficiently. People can take a year out of their life or 2 years, whatever it is, and realistically go and learn another language if you wanted to. And why can't we do it in our languages? That's my question. So, building a foundation with sufficient resources is vital to implementing a successful language revitalization strategy. If you don't have a foundation, you're going to be on shaky ground. If you don't know where you're going in your program, then you're blindly going in the dark direction. We all know that peak is up there, or that mountain, or that place on the horizon. We can see it. We see it in our first language speakers, our elders, our speaking community, whatever it may be. But we need to bring along our communities, our people, the ones that need to learn, our children. So the resources in sustaining that journey are the support and investment into the language efforts. Right now, that support, that investment is severely limited for our efforts. We need an efficient and effective language transfer system and a long-term strategy. When I'm talking long-term, I'm talking 2 generations. We need a long-term strategy to plot that course so that we are continuously improving what we're doing. We need to measure the impact and the progress of what we're doing. That's what funders like. I work for a funding agency. We ask that question all the time. Tell me the impact of what you're doing. Measure it so that we can report it. And we can tell, we know the dollars that we're investing are making an impact. We want to know that. On that journey, you need to know the lay of the land, Understanding the lay of the land is, understanding that terrain. Is there some obstacles here that I need to go around? Do I need to remove some things here to make this journey shorter for the people that are coming? That's understanding how your language works. It's so vital, so critical. In Salish, we don't really have nouns, and that concept is very foreign to English speakers because English is so noun-based. So how do I impart that knowledge onto a learner? How do I get them to understand that the things that they're saying aren't nouns? See, it's those kinds of things that need to be studied and then incorporated into a course of study so that your students are learning those things. And then once that route is established, you want to shorten it as much as possible. So if I have a goal that my language program is going to produce speakers in 5 years, that 5 years is a long time for an individual to invest in becoming fluent in their language. Some people can do it, but not a whole lot of people can do it. If that time frame is 12 months, a lot more people can do that. And as more and more people learn a language within your community, it invigorates the rest of the community, and they can see that, oh, this guy here learned it. Anybody can learn it. Is that what he said earlier? So this is about thinking about long-term strategy and measuring what you're doing so that you know how far you've come, so that you know how far you need to go. So the tools and the guides on that journey, continuing with this metaphor, is that is your teaching capacity. How many teachers do you have that are highly experienced and well-trained and understand how adults learn language, understand how children learn second languages? Teachers are that facilitator of transferring that language from speaker to non-speaker. They're the guides along the journey. They're the ones saying, you've come this far, you have this far to go. That's motivation and incentive for someone. If they know how far they need to go, then they're more incentivized to continue on that journey. I'm sure we are all aware of people that have been learning the language. They learn for a long time and then they quit, then they get back into it. I think that happens because we don't know how far we need to go or where we're at in the progress on that journey. Teachers are the foundation of a language transfer system. Without well-trained, highly experienced teachers, things are difficult. So now I'm going to get into the language transfer system. And I'm going to read what I wrote here. A language transfer system is a set of subsystems and cycles that aim to build the capacity to effectively and efficiently transfer language from the hearts and minds of speakers to non-speakers in a structured, holistic, goal-oriented approach. It's a lot of words there. I'm going to use the words effective and efficient quite a bit because I think that's where a language program needs to be in order to actually produce speakers. The production of speakers is effective, but if that production of a speaker takes 20 years, that's very inefficient. 12 to 24 months, that's the goal or the target any language program should be aiming for. So in that journey metaphor, an effective and efficient language transfer system guides non-speakers in an ever-widening, well-worn, and increasingly shorter route to join the speaking community. Keep hitting the wrong button. So a language transfer system components are made up of a teacher training system, an instructional system, an assessment system, and the language study system. And the goal is to produce speakers from non-speakers, to grow the speaking community. That's the overview of what a language transfer system is. And I'm going to show you a drawing that I made to represent what a language transfer system is. Now keep in mind, I've been thinking about this language transfer system for quite a few years and had the fortunate opportunity this past year to finally implement it as a training program for, I worked with 9 language programs throughout Washington and Oregon. And when I was thinking about how do I impart this knowledge onto somebody else, I had to design all the training materials, all the PowerPoints, all the things that the participants needed, and how they were going to develop their own language transfer system within their communities. This training program is about 80 hours long. It took place over the course of 9 months, and we just completed it last week. So I don't have any evaluation data for that right now because we haven't analyzed it yet. But so I'm getting to this picture that I'm going to put up here. It's a hand-drawn picture, and it came about. I was sleeping, and I woke up one morning. I was like, "Oh, I got it!" And I quickly drew it, and here it is. Don't laugh. So this is my hand drawn. I use this all the time because it just came to me right when I woke up in the morning. So what it represents here is the non-speaking community is going along the journey to join the speaking community. And what that bottom circle there represents is the instructional system. It's the heart of this entire transfer system. It's where you have sufficient teaching capacity through structured immersion, bringing people along so that they're joining that speaking community. All the information of your language transfer system, of the curriculum, all flows down from your speaking community. They're the ones that hold that language. And all that information gets incorporated within the entire system. There's the language study subsystem, which is all about figuring out and studying and dissecting. That's where linguistics becomes very important. You don't need to be a linguist to study your own language, but you need to be documenting what you're learning so that you can incorporate those features, those words into lessons so that your students are learning, so that your people are learning, your community. The foundation of this whole program is that you have well-trained, highly experienced teachers, and you need to be creating teachers in order to bring more and more people along this instructional system to join the speaking community. And the way that you continually shorten that route and improve what you're doing to actually produce speakers is you need to assess what you're doing, you need to measure, you need to say, this thing, if something isn't working, don't keep doing it over and over and over. Change it, make it better, make it, throw it out and try something else, whatever it is that you have to do. But you need to be looking at what you're doing and asking yourself, is what I'm doing, is this working? Is this leading to the production of speakers? If not, where does this work fit within this entire system? So this represents that language transfer system. And you can ask me all kinds of questions later on this afternoon, I guess. So I'm going to start with the speaking community. The speaking community is like the earth. It's our mother. It's where our language resides. From our elders to all the people that speak our languages. That's where we're going to put our foundation for this language transfer system on. We need to, in order to bring back our languages, we need to elevate our language. It needs to become important. It needs to be something that our children want to learn. It needs to be something that our community wants to learn. We need to elevate the status of it. We need to get our current speakers together so that they're holding conversations in the language. We need to create space for our advanced learners so that they can join and be immersed in that language. And we need to build and enhance that community so that it's valuable. It's valuable to not just us in the effort of learning and teaching our languages, but valuable to our whole community, to our tribal government, to the people that see the value in language revitalization. We need to instill that. So some of the things is, you need to make the language prestigious, make speaking cool, elevate the status of your speakers. And one way is creating awards and recognitions for speaking. So the speaking community is where all that knowledge resides of our language, and they need to be valued and elevated in status so that all the other people that are interested see the value in that. So in order to do that, you need to engage that speaking community. You need to build, you need to create events that encourage that community to come together to be a strong unit. I like that the domain, all the breaking out all those things, the domains. That was really interesting. Where at in your community is a language spoken? Make those places, elevate those places. And then you need to, as a program, you need to maintain the relationship with all those speakers that want to be engaged, and helping them to continue to come together, make a space just for them so that they can converse in the language. In my community, all of our speakers, we have about 45 speakers left, and they're all kind of spread out, and they're all in their own places. And there's only one time, once a month, that they come together. Some of them come together. And it's kind of sad sometimes because they'll say a little bit in the language, and then they'll switch to English. Then they'll say a little bit more. And the language isn't being encouraged because there's English speakers in the room. They want to bring everybody in there. So at least in my community, it's important that the language speakers themselves are together and conversing. As soon as you bring someone that doesn't understand the language, they're going to revert to English because they want that respect of relationship and community. They want them to be a part of that. So the foundation of the language transfer system, the program, a language program, is teachers. If you don't have teachers, it's very difficult for someone to learn. So I pulled out this quote here. One of the most effective means of improving the teaching core is by wise selection. And that is making sure you're picking the right people to become teachers, because you're going to invest in them very, very long term, and you want people that are good at teaching. So an effective and efficient language transfer system happens when facilitated by well-trained first or second language speakers who are highly educated. They're experienced and skilled. They understand how languages are learned. And they can speak the language with increasing proficiency. We're all learning the language. We continue to learn. It doesn't matter how old you are. Like Dr. Littlebear was saying yesterday, how fluent is he? He's as fluent as he is. So the teacher training system is about selecting the right individuals to invest in, to become teachers, because they're going to be, you want them to be engaged in teaching the language for as long as they can. The program itself, teacher training program, needs to be developed and refined and enhanced over the cycles of each say cohort going through the program. And it's done through a sequence course of instruction. Again, it's an immersion program, a structured immersion program. And the thing about structured immersion is it incorporates everything that you're probably doing already, whether that's TPR, whether that's any method that you may use to teach your students. Vocabulary building is part of a structured immersion. You need, in the teacher training system, you need to assess your curriculum constantly. You need to assess your instruction, and you need to assess how well students are learning, because over time you want to continuously improve what you're doing so that you're making it more and more efficient as time goes on. And the teacher training system is where you're developing teachers. And in order to fully implement a teacher training system is you have to have teachers that can teach other teachers. So these people need to be highly educated and have a very strong understanding of of the language itself, how it works, so that they can impart that knowledge onto the teachers, because those teachers in turn then need to teach our students and have that same knowledge. So an ideal language teacher, if you're out there and you're selecting somebody, is somebody that's going to have a wide range of knowledge. That's education, skills, and experience. They're going to know the target language. They know the second language acquisition process. They understand learning. They have to have patience and understanding. They have to have lots of energy. They need to be entertaining, imaginative, and innovative. And they need to treat students with respect. For most of us, we've put our fluent speakers, our first language speakers, in the position of teachers, whether they were good at that or not. And I think about that a lot. If we were to go down to the casino floor down there and just randomly pick somebody down there and say, hey, okay, you're going to teach English to all these people that don't know anything about English. Go do it. You know, they may or may not have the skills to do that. And that's what many of us are in the situation of. We put our elders in that situation to become that teacher. But we have to start somewhere, and we have to build upon what we're already doing so that we're making improvements, because the goal is to produce speakers. So second language teaching is about using methods, strategies, and tools to facilitate the transfer of language to non-speakers. Not all language learners have the ability to teach language. Again, the teachers need to be, have a lot of skills, education, experience. They need to be continuously learning about their language so that they can impart that knowledge onto them. And when you're selecting teachers to invest in, I'm talking about new teachers, you need to choose wisely, because they're going to be in it for the long term. So effective language teachers are well-trained and experienced, and they're the foundation of any language program, any language transfer system program, any program that you have. Language teachers transfer language. That's the job of a language teacher. That's effective. They're producing speakers. And then through innovation and imagination, language teachers facilitate that learning process in an increasingly shorter amount of time with each new group of students or learners. That's efficiency. So you want to be effective, first of all. You want to be able to produce speakers, and you want to shorten that amount of time. And I say this a lot, highly educated. So in my travels of going around to different programs and seeing how they operate, there was only one program that I went to that I felt was actually producing speakers consistently. And they had 6 teachers there, and every single one of the teachers were first language speakers. And every single one of the teachers had at least a master's degree in some education field, whether that was bilingual education or second language acquisition, bicultural education. These teachers and this program produced speakers of students, young kids, within 6 months. And I was blown away by this program. But they had a very structured immersion program. The teachers were highly educated. They knew what they were doing as far as understanding how children learn language. So teachers, this is the goal. This is what you should be striving for in developing your teaching core. Essential to to education goals of teachers is that teachers have a general education degree, some kind of degree in education. They understand second language acquisition. They have a bilingual education degree or a bicultural education degree. And other degrees that would be helpful would be like early childhood education or English as a second language and linguistics.
We're getting there.
So again, teaching is the foundation of any language program.
Keep on going.
And you need to invest wisely in who you're selecting as a teacher. Okay, education is very important to creating high quality or highly skilled and experienced teachers. Some other things that should be goals is that your teachers are attaining graduate degrees. And efficient language transfer happens when you have exceptional teachers. That's the premise of having well-educated, highly experienced, highly skilled teachers is producing speakers. That's the goal of language revitalization. The goal of any language program should be producing speakers. Again, just hitting on this, from this quote here, I did then what I knew how to do. Now that I know better, I do better. That's the learning process. If what you're doing now is all that you have, learn from that, build upon that, improve what you're doing. I'm going to skip through these. Skills are important. Imagination. Teachers need to be imaginative. They need to be creative. They need to be innovative. They need to be trying new things all the time, because the goal is to produce speakers. If you're not producing speakers, something needs to change. Experience. Teachers need to have time to gain that experience. In the teacher training system, it's about bringing along these teachers, building that foundation, that teaching capacity. Because the more teachers you have, the more students can learn, the more your community can learn. Teachers need to speak the language. In order to teach a language, you must speak the language, or at least be able to teach what you know of that language. Language teachers need to always be learning the language. They should never stop learning. There's always something you can learn about your language, whether you're a first language speaker or you're a learner. I know I learn about English all the time. So the heart of this language transfer system is the instructional system. That's where you're moving people, non-speakers, to speakers. So an effective language instruction happens when language is transferred from teacher to learner. And the business of language instruction is facilitating effective language transfer in an increasingly efficient manner. Producing speakers is effective, but you want to produce them efficiently in a short amount of time. You want to improve the language transfer process over time. Curriculum, you want to improve curriculum effectiveness and efficiency, and that's done through evaluating what you're doing, understanding how well language is transferred from the speaker to the learner. You want to increase the you want to increase the effectiveness and efficiency of your instructional sequence. And again, that's based upon an understanding of how well you're progressing in that. How well are you producing speakers? How is the efficiency of that? How long does it take? So the components of the instructional system is the environment, the curriculum, the instructor, the language transfer methods, and the learner. The environment is, where do you hold your classes at? Where do you hold this learning at? Is it in a classroom? Is it outside? Where do you need to be to be effective at what you're doing, transferring that language? Where is it best? Where's the where are you going to be able to facilitate that learning process in an efficient manner? How well is your curriculum developed so that you're actually bringing people along and learning the language and you're producing speakers? How skilled and trained and educated is that instructor? And all of those tools that have been developed for second language acquisition, they can all be incorporated into a sequenced curriculum. And the learner itself, how well do they know where they're at in the learning process? The better you have an understanding of where you are and where you need to go, the more incentive you have to continue on that journey. So the essentials of the instruction system is that non-speakers become speakers. You're producing speakers. It's the heart of the language transfer system. You're continuously refining to increase efficiency. Can't even talk now. Teaching capacity must match student desire. Teachers are well supported and given sufficient time to recharge periodically. This is very, very, very important. It's a very draining thing to do to teach language, especially in an immersion environment. So teachers need to be highly supported by the program, by the community, by giving them time to recharge, attend conferences or gatherings such as this that re-energize you. It's important. So an efficient instruction system produces speakers in 12 to 24 months. I've been saying this over and over and over, and it's true with most language programs out there. The big languages I'm talking about. It's what we should be striving for within our own language programs. If you're not there, you have a lot of work to do. There's a difference between teacher learning and student learning. If you're going to become a teacher, you need to acquire proficiency in that language sufficient enough to teach that language. You need to be a part of that speaking community. You need to gain knowledge of how the grammar works within your language. Not that you're going to teach grammar, but that you know how it works so that you can impart that information to them in a way that is effective and efficient. You need to understand the levels of language stages. And by that I mean, where is somebody at in the learning process? What is their fluency level? How much do they know? Where are they going and how far do they need to go? How far have they come? And to compare that with somebody that just wants to become a speaker of the language, not necessarily a teacher, they just need to acquire proficiency in the language and join that speaking community. So that's the difference between a learner that wants to be a teacher compared to a learner that just wants to speak. So the learning environment, I've talked about this a little bit already. Learning the language can be very intimidating, especially for adults. It's very challenging. So effective learning happens in an engaging, safe, supportive, and respectful environment. And the use of real props in actual locations is ideal for efficient language acquisition. So developing that curriculum that you're going to use, curriculum is a set of courses consisting of an area of specialization. It is the plan or set of plans that outlines the sequence of instruction. So again, if you look at that metaphor of a journey, it's the map, it's the guides, the markers along the way, it's all the things that help you along that journey. That's what the curriculum is. So the curriculum in a language program must be continuously refined and incorporate every new understanding of the language that is discovered by the people that are studying it, whether that's you, the teacher, or a linguist, or some other people that are doing that. That information needs to be captured and then incorporated within the curriculum so that students are learning the information that is being discovered. Effective and efficient curriculum is organized that scaffolds learning, meaning that it's going to build this knowledge on top of the other knowledge as you're going forward. And assessment data is how you refine that curriculum. By evaluating that information, you can make judgments on how to improve or refine that instructional sequence. I've already talked about all this. The curriculum is the roadmap to help learners and the instructors know where they started, where they're going, how far along the path of learning they are. So the assessment system, so assessment refers to all the activities undertaken by the teachers and their students in assessing themselves, where I'm at in this learning process, which provide information to be used as feedback to modify the teaching. How well am I teaching? How well is this knowledge being imparted to my students? And learning activities in which they are engaged. So you're looking and you're making judgments on what you're doing. How well is this curriculum sequenced? Do I need to change something so that they're learning this other knowledge before they get to this other place? Those things need to be asked. So there's all kinds of assessment. There's assessment for learning, there's assessment as learning, and assessment of learning, and then there's evaluation. And then there's diagnostic assessment, which starts at the beginning. You're establishing a baseline, where is somebody at and how far they need to go. Formative assessment is what you look at as they're going along the journey of learning. And then summative assessment is, did they achieve that learning at the end? Did they become a speaker? I'm going to skip over all these things here because I'm running out of time. So in a language program, the criteria of assessment is vocabulary, syntax, and semantics. Vocabulary, there's two main kinds of vocabulary in oral language. That's your listening vocabulary, which is going to be your largest. We all understand more than we can speak in the language of our first language. So listening vocab is the set of spoken words that are understood. And then speaking vocabulary is going to be smaller than your listening. And it's a set of words that can be spoken. Vocabulary assessment is measuring the number of vocabulary words on a predetermined list and making the judgment. So if I produce a list of words that I want to incorporate in a certain lesson, at the end of that lesson, did my students learn all those words? Do they understand them? Do they understand them listening? Can they speak them if that's a goal? And And then if you assess that at the end of the learning and they know it, and then you assess it again 2 weeks later, and they still know it, then you know that they've acquired that. And if you assess it again 2 months later, that's long-term memory, and they still know it, then you know what you've done, it was good. Whatever methods that you use, that's what you want to keep doing in all of your lessons. So vocabulary assessment is creating leveled lists of vocabulary words where you think they will be understood and used. So when you're studying your language and you come across a word, whatever word that may be, or a feature of the language, and you say, okay, this word I think is going to be learned at this level of learning, this stage of learning. You place it there. And then you can assess whether they've learned it or not at that stage. And the stages that I use are novice, intermediate, advanced, and superior. And the novice, intermediate, and advanced have 3 levels within them. It's low, mid, and high. This is from the ACTFL assessment. And you need to assess syntax, and you need to study that, and you need to be able to understand what it is, how does your language held together, how is it constructed. This is probably the most difficult part of language and language learning. It's vocabulary words are the easiest thing to learn, but grammar is very difficult because grammar is often very different than English or what we already know. So this here is just listing what some examples of what grammar is or syntax is. So assessing syntax is about measuring the listening and speaking understanding, measuring the listening and speaking and understanding and usage. It's understanding the syntactic features are leveled using novice, intermediate, advanced, and superior classification. The assessment gathers data on the level of usage and counts the grammar features. And the data is measured and compared against known studies of the language and established levels. So what I'm saying here is that when you're creating the measure, you have to put your grammar features into a leveled system in order to make a judgment about where someone is at in the learning process. Now, an assessment metric is not a static thing as well. It can change as you learn more about your language or you learn more about your process of learning and how you're measuring. You can change it. It's not a static document. You can add to it. You can take things out of it. And then finally, semantics is meaning and understanding the meaning of language and the expression of logic. It's philosophy. It's how we perceive the world around us. It's about if your language has this, the living and the non-living, or the animate and the inanimate. It's about how we relate to place and how we express that through our language. Those are all things about the meaning of language and how we express who we are and where we're at and how we relate to the world. So again, you need to measure that, or you need to assess that. And in order to assess that, you need to be able to know what it is that you're assessing. What features, semantic features do you know in your language? And where at along the learning process should someone learn about that or know this information? You need to put that down so that you're measuring against that, and how effective and efficient is your language transfer happening against that measure. And this is what I've been saying all along. It's that evaluating what you're doing so that you are making those improvements. You're making that judgment based on a set of metrics that you yourself produce or a team of people, or however it may be that it comes about. How well did my teaching go in this lesson? Did they learn what I wanted them to learn, the goals? I'm going to skip over these here. Oh, the F word. Fluency. Language fluency is the degree to which one is fluent in a language. Someone is said to be fluent if he or she has a high level of language proficiency. And what does that mean? To me, fluency is the ability to express yourself easily and articulately within the language. You can express your desires, your wants, your needs. What does that mean to you? You know, how do you assess that fluency? If you don't set a standard, you have nothing to judge your teaching or your language program against. And you can set any kind of standard you want, a 1 to 10 scale, or 1 to 100 scale, or novice, intermediate, advanced, superior. Any kind of system that you develop is sufficient, as long as you have some kind of measure, some kind of standard where you're placing the vocabulary words down on that measure. Say, beginning learner should know these amounts of vocabulary and this amount of syntax and this amount of semantics. If you don't place that down on a leveled system, you have nothing to judge or compare your progress to as a learner or as a teacher. So I use this proficiency scale. It's the American Council on Teaching of Foreign Languages. And it is set up on a novice, intermediate, advanced, and superior level. The superior level is a first language speaker. Do I still have some time? Am I done? Okay. All right. Well, I just want to say thank you all. I'm grateful to be able to present this. I didn't think I was going to get through the whole thing anyways. But I will be very happy to answer any questions later on this afternoon. And thank you very much.